Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to this screencast on acclimatisation. So we've looked at altitude and the effects that altitude have on the cardiovascular and respiratory system, and we look at that as a negative. Okay, so whenever we're asked a question on altitude, we have to think it is a negative. It is not looking for positives. It is looking for the effects of altitude on the cardiovascular and respiratory system, which are a negative. Now, acclimatization, we have to look at this now with regards to positive. Okay, acclimatization to altitude is a positive step. Therefore, in an exam, if you're asked a question on acclimatization, we are looking at it as though it is a positive. So as we get started, or before we get started, I just want to go through some keywords with you. First of all, acclimatization, and we are going to go through this again during this PowerPoint. Now, acclimatization is the process where an athlete gradually adapts to a change in their environment. We are acclimatizing to the different environment we are in. And we need to know how long acclimatization takes for different heights or levels of altitude. And we need to know the benefits of acclimatization as well. Another keyword that's really important is this term erythropoietin. Okay, now this is a naturally produced hormone responsible for the production of red blood cells. So this is what produces red blood cells within our body, erythropoietin. Okay, naturally produced hormone. We all have erythropoietin being produced, and this is responsible for the production of red blood cells. We're going to go on about that in more detail. So, first of all, acclimatization. So now we're talking about being 2,400 meters above sea level. Okay, remember that is altitude. Altitude is a kind of a height above sea level. So we're 2,400 meters at altitude at the moment. I'm just going to go through what acclimatization is again. So it's that process when an athlete gradually adapts to their change or to a change in their environment. In this case, at altitude, we are talking about a change in the partial pressures of oxygen. Okay, so in the sense of altitude, the acclimatization is acclimatizing to the lower partial pressure of oxygen in the atmospheric air altitude. That is what we need to become acclimatized to. Now, if we're talking about being 2,400 meters above sea level, we need to know how long it is going to take to acclimatize to this level of altitude. Okay, now we need to know that this is going to take 2 weeks. Okay, so at an altitude of above 2,400 meters, it will take 2 weeks to acclimatize. So if you are an athlete, whether or not it's an endurance athlete such as a marathon runner, if you are playing for England in a World Cup and you fly over to South America, and some parts of South America, for example Peru, you may have to perform 2,400 meters above sea level. Therefore, it would be critical that you got to that destination 2 weeks before the actual competition, because you are going to need 2 weeks to acclimatise. You're going to need 2 weeks to get used to performing at that level of altitude. So, for example, the little picture you've got here on your screen, we've got a runner here, we've got a little tent. Just this is trying to kind of insinuate that this athlete is going to have to stay at this level for 2 weeks so that they can perform at that level of altitude, so they can acclimatise. Acclimatization is a benefit, it is a positive. So we need to look at the benefits of acclimatization for the cardiovascular and for the respiratory system. The first benefit we're going to look at is an increase in red blood cell production, and this is due to an increased release of erythropoietin. Remember, erythropoietin is a naturally produced hormone which is responsible for the production of red blood cells. So we get an increase in red blood cell production, and this is because there's an increased release of erythropoietin. So the lack of oxygen that is available at altitude, when we have a lack of oxygen, erythropoietin is released. Okay, that's all we need to know. So when there's a lack of oxygen, the body realizes this, and then more erythropoietin is produced. Therefore, we get an increase in red blood cell production. Breathing frequency and tidal volume eventually stabilise after 2 weeks at altitude. However, they do remain elevated at rest and during exercise when compared with sea level. So they're still elevated, however they stabilise. Point number 3 we need to be aware of is stroke volume and cardiac output reduce as oxygen extraction becomes more efficient. Now you have got to think we've got an increase in red blood cells, or an increase in red blood cell production, therefore we have an increase in hemoglobin. Therefore, more oxygen is going to be able to attach to the greater amount of hemoglobin or saturate with the increased amount of hemoglobin. Therefore, oxygen extraction becomes more efficient, so stroke volume and cardiac output can reduce. And finally, because of all of these three things here, or because of these three things here, i.e. an increase in red blood cell production, stabilisation of breathing frequency and tidal volume, a decrease in stroke volume and cardiac output, this means there is a reduced incidence of altitude sickness, headaches, breathlessness, poor sleep, and lack of appetite. So the overall effect of this is we have a decrease in altitude sickness, and we're going to be able to perform at that level of altitude due to acclimatizing, which is a benefit. If you get asked a question on acclimatization, we have to look at it as a positive. Acclimatization is good because we get an increase in red blood cell production. As stabilized, or our breathing frequency and tidal volume stabilize, this is beneficial. Stroke volume and cardiac output reduce because there is more efficient extraction of oxygen. Finally, there is reduced incidence of altitude sickness, which is a benefit. Hopefully that helps. Please ensure you have Cornell notes that have got kind of what erythropoietin is, what acclimatization actually is, okay, as a definition. You may get asked with regards to defining acclimatization, and please make sure you've got down these 4 points that are benefits and you've got decent questions that give you the answers of these, okay. Thank you. I'll see you in your lesson. Bye.